Have you ever wondered how far a single act of kindness can travel? Not wealth, not power, not fame, just kindness. Sometimes it isn't the loud, heroic deeds that touch the soul. It's the quiet, fragile gestures, the ones nobody notices. A hand extended in silence, a smile shared with tears, a piece of bread given away by someone who had nothing. This is the story of a boy, a grandmother, and a stranger, and how a single moment of sacrifice broke every heart that witnessed it. His name was Daniel Carter. Daniel was not the kind of boy who stood out in a crowd. He wasn't the tallest. He wasn't the strongest. And he certainly wasn't the luckiest. He was just 12 years old, with brown hair that always looked a little messy, and eyes that carried a depth far older than his years. Because Daniel had already known loss. At the age of 9, he lost his mother. Illness had taken her swiftly. One week she was humming lullabies. The next week, the house was silent. His father. He had disappeared long before, leaving behind only a fading photograph and unanswered questions. So Daniel was left with only one person, his grandmother, Margaret Carter. Margaret was a woman carved out of love and sorrow. Her silver hair framed a face worn with wrinkles, not from laughter, but from years of endurance. Her hands shook when she worked. Her steps were slow, yet her heart beat only for Daniel. Together, they lived in a small, broken-down apartment on the edge of the city. The paint peeled from the walls, the windows whistled with cold air, and the old heater coughed more than it worked. But Daniel never complained. Because for him, that tiny home was still filled with his grandmother's warmth. Yet life was harsh. The neighbors rushed past, carrying bags of groceries, laughing with their families. Daniel would watch children his age, dressed in fresh clothes, running with toys, sharing stories about dinners they had at restaurants. And he wore the same old shoes with holes at the front. His jacket was patched in 3 different places. And dinner, most nights, was nothing more than a slice of bread, sometimes with a thin layer of butter, sometimes not even that. But Daniel smiled. He carried books from the library, even though his stomach growled during class. He would whisper to his grandmother, "I'll be fine, Grandma. Don't worry about me." Because deep inside, Daniel had a heart that cared more for others than for himself. Hunger was Daniel's closest companion. There were nights when his stomach twisted in pain, nights when he would press a pillow against it just to silence the growling, nights when he would close his eyes and imagine the smell of freshly baked bread he could never taste. But what hurt more was watching his grandmother suffer. Margaret tried to work. She washed clothes for neighbors. She sewed buttons back on jackets. She scrubbed floors until her knees ached. But her health was failing. Some days, she could barely lift her head. On those days, Daniel would quietly skip meals, telling her, "I ate at school," even though he hadn't. One winter evening, the cold bit harder than usual. Snowflakes drifted down, melting into puddles on the cracked pavement. Daniel's shoes soaked through as he walked home, his hands trembling from the chill. When he entered their little apartment, the air smelled faintly of boiled water and stale bread. That was dinner. On the small wooden table lay a single piece of bread. Hard, crusty, probably from the day before. His grandmother sat beside it, her thin fingers resting on her lap. She looked at Daniel with wary eyes and whispered, "It's all we have for tonight, Daniel." Daniel nodded, forcing a smile. He broke the bread in half and pushed the bigger piece toward her. "Grandma, you need it more than I do." She shook her head firmly, sliding it back. "No, my dear, you're still growing. You eat." And so, with hands trembling from hunger, Daniel picked up his half. His stomach ached for it. His lips longed to taste it. But fate had other plans that night. As Daniel lifted the bread to his mouth, his eyes drifted to the window. Outside, on the corner of the street, sat a man. His clothes were torn, his beard unkempt, his body leaned against the wall as if even sitting was too heavy for him, his eyes hollow, empty. Eyes that spoke of 1,000 untold sorrows. Daniel stared at him for a long moment. He knew that look, that pain, that hunger. The bread in his hand suddenly felt heavier. His stomach growled angrily, begging him not to. His lips trembled as he thought, "This is all I have, my last piece of bread." And yet his heart whispered louder. Slowly, Daniel stood. His grandmother's voice trembled behind him. Daniel, where are you going? He didn't answer. He stepped outside. The cold air hit his face. His shoes sank into the snow. Each step felt heavier than the last. The man looked up, startled, as Daniel approached. Daniel's small hands extended forward. In them the bread. His last piece of bread. The man blinked in disbelief. His lips trembled. Child, why? Don't you need this yourself? Daniel swallowed hard, his voice soft, almost breaking. I know what hunger feels like, and I don't want you to feel it tonight. For a moment, silence hung in the air. The world seemed to stop. Then the man broke. Tears streamed down his face as he took the bread, clutching it to his chest as if it were the greatest treasure in the world. His body shook with sobs. He pulled Daniel into his arms, whispering, "Bless you, child, bless you." From the doorway, Margaret stood, her frail hands covering her mouth. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she watched her grandson. Hungry, shivering, weak, give away the only thing he had left. Strangers walking by slowed their steps. Some stopped. Some wiped their eyes, because in that single act they saw humanity. A boy with nothing, giving everything. That night, Daniel went to bed with an empty stomach, but his heart was full. The man, however, did not vanish into the night. He returned the next day and the next. Each time, he carried something with him, a loaf of bread, a basket of fruit, sometimes even a pot of warm soup. One evening, he sat with Margaret and Daniel at their little table. His voice was soft as he explained, "I was not always a beggar. I was once a teacher. I had a family, but I lost them all in an accident. Grief consumed me. I lost my job, I lost my home, and I lost myself. But when your grandson gave me his bread, he gave me something greater than food. He gave me back dignity. Hope, a reason to keep living." From that day forward, the man, whose name was Thomas, became part of their lives. He helped Margaret with her chores. He brought medicine. He taught Daniel lessons from old books. And slowly, their lives changed. All because a boy, who had nothing, gave away everything he had. That is the miracle of kindness. It doesn't just feed the stomach. It feeds the soul. It doesn't just save one life. It transforms many. A single act multiplies. Why, it wasn't wealth or fame that changed a life. It was a simple act of kindness.